Hello and a warm welcome to everyone. I am officially launching my YouTube channel today called That Poetry Place with a presentation on fractal fluency. With this channel, I hope to address the healing power of art, especially through poetry. Thank you for tuning in. If it touches you, I hope you'll return for future episodes, but most of all, I hope you'll share it with others. Illness is a mercurial thread that binds us all. Far greater than any procedure or pharmaceutical remedy, I believe with my whole heart it is the arts and our humane treatment of one another that will save us. I'll start with a brief self-introduction. My name is Stacy and I've worked in healthcare for 23 years. I started out managing a private practice and was licensed as a registered nurse 16 years ago. I presently serve as operations administrator, but I still charge in the ER and sometimes take patients at the bedside, especially during COVID surges. I also have a passion for the arts, especially creative writing. I consider both fields my life's work in equal measure. Luckily, I found a small press that supports my written work, Press 53 in North Carolina. They've published 2 books of my poetry, Scissored Moon and Sky the Ore, and we're working on a third, I'm humbled to say, called My Borrowed Face, which will be available later this year. Interestingly enough, Press 53's poetry editor, Tom Lombardo, is also the founding editor of WebMD. Now, on to today's topic, fractal fluency and the art of healing. Let's start by considering the question, what does it mean for something to be beautiful? Generally, when we say something is beautiful, we mean that it is aesthetically pleasing to the senses. Synonyms for beautiful include lovely, charming, delightful, appealing, engaging, winsome, arresting, glamorous, irresistible, bewitching, beguiling, graceful, artistic. Look at this scene. Think of how you might experience the potential for beauty in this place. First, visually, right? Perhaps from the vantage point of an overview, which is pictured here. You can appreciate the climbing curves, and even though it's black and white representation, you can imagine the colors. One might also walk up or down the stairs and appreciate the texture of the wooden steps, the sound of your footsteps or your voices as you ascend or descend. The feel of the hardware on your hands if there's a railing or your foot soles on the stairs themselves. Perhaps lingering scents along the corridor of wood or paint, other building materials, or even a companion's perfume. Lots of chances to engage all of the senses here to experience beauty, right? However one defines beauty, it is generally accepted that we as human beings respond favorably to it. And for anyone who cares for another who is suffering, it begs the question, how does experiencing something beautiful affect us physiologically? What are the implications for healing? Back in the 80s, a group of researchers first discovered that surgical patients recovered faster when placed in hospital rooms with windows, to an even faster degree when the view out of the window was of flowers or gardens, something green, something growing, just not infrastructure. Further studies have shown that just looking at pictures of nature scenes can change the way a person's autonomic nervous system responds to stress. Surgical patients assigned to rooms with windows overlooking green scenes have shorter post-operative stays, fewer problems chronicled in physician and nursing notes, and they took fewer analgesics than patients with windows facing brick walls or buildings. Think about what you often see pictures of in doctors' offices or hospitals. These choices are intentional. Now, we can't always ensure a green view, right? But it's worth noting that just the addition of a window makes a huge difference. Florence Nightingale knew this. She addressed this in her groundbreaking book, Notes on Nursing, which was published in 1860. She said, "Light is essential to both healing and recovery. It is the unqualified result of all my experiences with the sick that second only to their need of fresh air is their need of light, that after a closed room, what hurts them most is a dark room. And my favorite quote of all time, probably from Florence Nightingale, is, "The sun is not only a painter, but a sculptor." I'll repeat that. The sun is not only a painter, but a sculptor. Richard Taylor, a physicist at the University of Oregon, has worked for years creating artificial retinas for ophthalmology patients. His studies unexpectedly led him to discover the profound effects of fractal patterns on the human body, as well as their presence in nature and art. Taylor's studies found that fractals, which are, in the simplest terms, repetitive geometric patterns where the individual parts mimic the character of the whole, magnify themselves in nature and in art. Pioneering mathematician Benoit Mandelbro was also intrigued by this idea, that phenomena thought to be irregular or chaotic, such as coastlines, grooves in the tree bark, cracks in drying mud, actually have organized patterns and shape. Patterns that predictably repeat, even down to the finest magnifications. For example, think of a tree. Look at this picture. What's happening here from trunk to twig? Can you see how the repetitive patterns of the branches reduce uniformly, even down to the tiniest twig at the end of the branch? This is a perfect example of fractal fluency. What about this? Can anyone else appreciate a similar uniform reduction here, like the tree? The humerus spilling into the ulna and radius, which then pour into the carpals or finger bones. Certainly similar to what we just observed in nature. A tree of arms, a branching of bones, perhaps suggesting a deeper connection between humans and nature. Looking at this makes me think of that beautiful Joy Harjo poem, Remember. In it she says, "Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth." And speaking of poems, there are implications to the written word here as well. Writer Alice Fulton says, "Fractals make visible a third space with irregular structures containing just enough regularity to be described as patterns." Like chaos theory, complexity emphasizes dynamic rather than static structures, eccentric forms balanced between strict order and entropy. Now, of course, some poems follow established forms. You've got sonnets, villanelles, haikus, right? But some are considered free, and yet, even the free poems can reflect a fractal structure. This is a poem I wrote a few months ago called Lie. I wrote it while serving as a bedside caregiver during the height of our Delta surge, working in a saturated hospital. Before I read it aloud, I just want to call attention to the placement of the words themselves on the page. It was my hope to create a balance of vertical and negative space. And looking back at the tree image and the arm image that we just looked at, also something that was flowing and descending uniformly, netting a fractally fluent result. I'll read the poem now. I tell you, it's okay. You fall asleep on a bench seat. I replace your keening oxygen tank hourly in the lobby. Someone else calls your wife with an update. I have worn this mask for 6 days. These are not my hands. This is not my face. Now, in addition to balancing the negative space, the placement of the words vertically and horizontally on the page, I also wanted to balance the sounds and textures of the words, which in the fourth line you'll notice I have the repeating long E sounds: asleep, seat, keening. Also, the repetition of long A's throughout. Okay, update, days, face, and the soft consonants, the repeating S's throughout. All intending to create a uniform pattern of fractal fluency. I'm not going to say too much more about what I hope to convey because I certainly want the work to speak for itself. I'd love to hear your opinions about how it speaks to you, whether you're a caregiver or someone who has received care or someone who loves another who is a caregiver or received care. Please put that in the comments for further discussion later. I will add, though, I like to end this discussion on this poem with a question: where is the lie? And inevitably, the answers are infinite. Moving forward to other applications in art, it's important to note that the paintings of abstract expressionists also demonstrate the power of fractals. Jackson Pollock created some of his most famous works by placing large canvases on the floor and pouring paint over the tops of them. His physical movement while pouring was an act of form and balance, netting a fractal result. It has been said that Pollock wasn't painting on the canvas itself, but on the space above it. Richard Taylor's team discovered fractals like those found in nature in Pollock's paintings. This, in Taylor's opinion, is partly responsible for Pollock's wide popularity as an artist, why people tend to have a pleasing reaction to Pollock's work, even if they can't exactly say why. Using electroencephalograms and measurements of electrical activity in the skin, researchers have recorded the brain's behavior in reaction to fractals. One of their most incredible discoveries is that while observing these patterns, stress can be reduced by up to 60%. This has remarkable implications for drug-free interventions. And any caregiver knows every little bit helps, right? Our brains respond favorably to structure, symmetry, and rhythm. Pollock's paintings work, so to speak. On a deeper level, his artistry makes sense. It's important to remember that fractals in nature and in art are neither accidental nor simple. Pollock himself stated, "No chaos, damn it," when challenged about the seemingly random nature of his work, also adding, "If people would just look at the paintings, I don't think they would have any trouble enjoying them. It's like looking at a bed of flowers. You don't tear your hair out over what it means." I've heard many times about Pollock's work. What's so great about that? My kid could do that. Just slap some random paint on a canvas, right? Well, those who have studied Pollock's work have found that imitations of his paintings generally don't elicit the same degree of satisfaction in casual observers, nor do they, upon closer inspection, exhibit the consistent fractal patterns noted in Pollock's work. Here's an example. This Pollock painting has been widely studied in terms of fractals. A recent analysis of this painting was conducted by the physics department at Boston College in collaboration with Harvard mathematician Lakshminarayan Mahadevan, who said, "My own interest is in the tension between the medium, the dynamics of the fluid, and the way it is applied." His team concluded that although at first glance this work can look deceptively accidental, the artist had to be slow, deliberate, to maximize the impact of fluid dynamics. The only way Pollock could create such tiny loopings and meandering oscillations was to hold his brush or trowel high up off the canvas and let out a flow of paint that narrowed and sped up as it fell. To create tiny loops rather than waves, he likely moved his hand slowly, deliberately, allowing fluid dynamics to co-author his art. And looking at this, I think one can certainly appreciate the repetitive patterns in the painting. The circular patterns of varying sizes and shapes distributed throughout the canvas. Also, the seeming appearance of figures, perhaps even human figures, in the middle of the piece. There are some linear elements as well, all pleasing, all balanced, fractally fluent. Other like-minded artists have produced drips and splashes by flicking their brushes. Pollock's technique, on the other hand, is driven by a slow-moving stream of paint. This work represents a rare collision of mathematics, physics, and art, providing new insight into the artist's methods and techniques, as well as his appreciation for the beauty of natural phenomena. Here's another example. There are two paintings here, both attributed to Jackson Pollock. Only one of them is a fake, but it's a very good fake. It fooled a lot of people, was for a time authenticated. Both of these paintings sold for millions of dollars to private collectors. What I'd like for you to do is take a moment to look at them. See which one you think is more pleasing, which one is more balanced, which one perhaps more fractally fluent. See if you can spot the fake. And I might suggest that in doing so, you try and lift each layer of color individually as you're observing to help you determine where the balance is. Going to pause for a minute while you study this. And in the next slide, I will reveal the true Pollock painting. Are you ready? And here you have it, the authentic Pollock painting. Beautifully balanced, fractally fluent, pleasing, a beautiful work of art. I think my favorite Pollock painting was actually one from a few years prior, before he perfected his drip technique. This one, Untitled, from 1945. But you can still see here, even though he's not dripping the paint, he was working deliberately with the brush strokes. Also beautifully balanced, fractally fluent, circular patterns, linear patterns, faces, all of my favorite colors. True masterpiece. And here is the floor of Jackson Pollock's studio in Springs, New York, his primary painting surface from 1946 to 1953. Proof that beauty can be found in the wake of creation, in the wake of destruction, even in things that aren't intentional. And I would like to leave you with the thought that a love of beauty is a love of humanity. It is all around us and within us. It will easily find us if we simply take the time to look. If any of you want to look up more about what we've discussed today, here are some websites for a few of the sources. I thank you all for tuning in. Again, if it touched you, I hope that you will share. I would love to hear your comments, and I hope that you'll be back for future episodes. I'm grateful for your time and attention. Thank you.